right, gang, we're moving into a new module here, and it's biology. Okay, so biology is my thing, right? So my degree is in microbiology, so I really love the life sciences. So we're going to start talking about life, what it means to be alive, and looking at living things for the next couple weeks, I guess. So it's module 10, yes? 10A, lab 22. All right. Life is good. It turns out there are 6 criteria for life. They've upped that. It used to be 5, and now they've made it 6 criteria for life. And let's see what they are. Number 1. So you're writing these down at the, I guess in a chart thing in the top of your book, yeah? Okay. All living things contain hereditary information in their DNA. Are y'all filling in just a blank there? Oh, good. You have to write all that stuff. That enables life to continue through reproduction. All right, in the old days we had DNA as one point and reproduction as a whole separate point. But now we're putting those together. So DNA, we're going to look at it in a little more detail here in just a minute. It's the code for living things. We all have our own set of DNA.
Right?
Say again?
You're not going to tell us about reproduction.
I don't think so, but maybe. It is part of biology, for sure. But anyway, DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid, and we'll see the shape of it and the structure over here in just a minute. Number 2, all living things use energy. They have to get it somehow. All right, so plants get their energy from the sun. Sun, of course, gets its energy from the gases that are being compressed, we think, in there. But on the earth, once the plants get the energy from the sun, the plants then give the energy to the animals that eat them, which give the energy to the animals that eat those animals, etc. All right, so we have to get energy either through the sun or through what we eat. And generally that's known as metabolism. All right, number 3, all living things can sense changes in their surroundings and respond to those changes. I have a picture here of sunflowers because they're some of the most dramatic plants that will move to follow the sun. They sense where the sun is and they move toward that. For us, of course, it's a little easier because we know we have senses, right? So if I shine a bright light in your face, just going to make you, wince a little bit and close your eyes, kind of a thing. And that's sensing your environment. If you touch something hot, you're going to pull away from that. Okay, that's sensing your environment. But all living things have some way of sensing. So, for instance, think about a mushroom. A mushroom is alive, right? And do they sense and change according to their environment? A lot of times we would say they move. And so a mushroom knows which way is down. So it knows which way for its mycelium to grow down into the dirt, right? So that's sensing gravity and things like this. All right, number 4, all living things are made up of cells. Some of those cells are very simple and they're single-celled organisms. Some of them are millions of cells, like us. We have millions of different cells in us. All living things chemically regulate their internal environment so that it is stable. The fancy word for this is homeostasis. It's all about balance. That guy's trying to balance there. All right, so stability. Our bodies, for instance, with humans, our bodies are constantly trying to stay at a very constant level. For instance, your temperature is 98.6 and your body wants to stay at 98.6. If you get too hot, we'll sweat to cool off. If you get too cold, you'll shiver to warm up. All right, it's just our body's way of getting to that homeostasis of temperature. Number 6, all living things reproduce and grow. So the DNA thing, had the reproduction part in there, but we're seeing here reproduction in the sense of growing, because even though this plant right here, it's growing, it's reproducing its own cells. Okay, it's like our skin cells are constantly reproducing. Okay, it doesn't necessarily have to do with making babies. It has to do with reproducing cellular tissue. All right, here we go. Let's talk a little bit about DNA. Stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. I won't ask you to remember that long word. You probably know it already, but I won't ask you to spell it out. I'll always just give you can just write a DNA. And what we know about it is that deoxyribonucleic acid provides the instructions for life in a living cell.
Where do we...
Apparently there's a blank that you're supposed to write the word instructions. Are you below something? Did you skip over something?
No. The blank for life in a living cell, the DNA molecule is made up of... No, I don't see that.
Huh.
there, it just kinda cuts off part of the sentence to the. Like it just cuts off the.
Oh, I guess it's just, you just write in this thing, did y'all put it right there, the instructions, the instructions. It's because that's not a complete sentence, right? The instructions for a living cell. That's, not a complete sentence. So DNA provides the instructions for life in a living cell. The DNA molecule is made of millions of proteins that contain the unique chemical instructions for life. Okay, so DNA is not just for, I've got, green eyes and darker hair and I'm 5'7", that's not just that, the things that are coded for. Right now, my DNA is unwinding and making new stuff in my body. It's the DNA coding that codes for new proteins to be made. When I eat food and I eat protein and I want to add protein to my body, the DNA is the code for that. All right, but it also codes for genetic traits. Like I mentioned before, what kind of traits do you have? Color your eyes, colors your hair. Certain genetic diseases, sadly, can be passed on. But according to the code of the DNA, we might end up with a puppy, right? So why is it a puppy? Why is it a golden retriever puppy? Because it's DNA coded for that. And where did that code come from? The parents of the puppy. All right, it's a huge molecule. One molecule of DNA is about 1,000 books each, 500 pages long. All right, so that's a lot of information coded into this microscopic thing. We can't even see it, y'all. We can't see it with a microscope, even the most powerful microscope out there. The only way we've been able to visualize DNA in any way is by sending off some little sound waves off of it, okay, and making sort of a little picture, like a little echo picture. And even then, we're still we're still working on what do we think the structure is. But what we think it is looks something like this. Okay, it's huge. In 1953, two different scientists, and I've read it both ways, that they were either working together or working separately. I thought first, all this time I've heard they were working separately, but just recently I heard something that they were working together. One's British and one's American. Watson's the American. They discovered by using those echo pictures off of DNA samples that it was a structure called a double helix. And put a star by that one. The shape of the DNA molecule is a double helix. We're going to make a model of that today so y'all get a good idea of what I mean by a double helix. It's a little bit like a spiral staircase or a ladder that has been spun around. The nucleotide bases are in the center in a twisted ladder. That should say structure. It says structure. It should say structure on the sides. I have to go fix that. All right, we're going to spend a little time just talking about DNA here, and then you won't have to necessarily write any notes about it. Is there a place for you to draw some DNA or no? Okay, so let's watch a little video.
This animation illustrates the three-dimensional nature of DNA. The red and white balls represent the molecules that make up DNA's backbone, while the other balls represent the nucleotide bases. Green represents cytosine, blue represents guanine, yellow represents adenine, and orange represents thymine. These nucleotide bases link together with hydrogen bonding, holding the two strands of the double helix together. Notice the green balls link to blue balls because cytosine and guanine link together, and yellow balls link to orange balls because adenine and thymine can link together. In Module 7, you'll learn that during the normal operations of the cell, the two strands of DNA actually unwind, exposing the nucleotide bases. This is important because the cell needs to read information that is stored in the sequence of the nucleotide bases. When the cell is done, the two strands come back together, forming the double helix once more.
Okay, and that Module 7 business, that's not correct anymore, so ignore that. All right, so there are 4 nucleotide bases. They are adenine, thymine, cytosine, and guanine, and we just call those A and T and C and G. Okay, so it's easy to remember because one of them spells the word at. It spells the word at, so you know that they always link together. And then here, Christ is God. Those always link together. Okay. So that might help you remember which ones go together. Plus, we're going to make a model today, so we'll figure that out. Okay, so once again, I'm not going to require you to write each one of these out and know how to spell them. A, T, C, and G will be fine for me. I don't think in your book you're supposed to write them out. Yes, it's important to know them. But there's only 4, so think about it. There's only 4 different bases, which accounts for the diversity of life on this planet. Everything from the complex structure of the human body all the way down to a microorganism, a bacterium. It's DNA that's coding for it. It's the same DNA. It's just they've switched up those 4 bases and what order they're in and how long it is. All right, so we're going to match these up. What does adenine go with? Thymine. And what does guanine go with? Obviously cytosine, right? So C and G, A and T. All right, they have an interesting structure. They're pretty large. I mean, when I say large, they're larger than H2O. They're still tiny. Remember, microscopic, we can't see these. So we can see how when they link together, here's our adenine and here's our thymine. Notice they have this kind of circular formation right here. That's like what we know as an organic molecule. And we're going to see there is a bond that's bonding the thymine to the adenine right here. Okay, so they fit together like a key in a lock. And that's why they hold on to each other. If next to the adenine, if a guanine comes up next close to it, it's not gonna fit. And so no, I don't want to bind with you. I'm only going to bind with the thymine. And also on the C and the G, I put these little green bonds right in here. They're bonding in 3 different places right there. All right, so I believe this is guanine and this is cytosine. And they once again fit together. So we can see we have 2 bonding sites here and we have 3 bonding sites here. Say again?
Do I have to draw this?
No. All right, so what is DNA made of? Well, remember, atoms are the smallest unit of matter. We know that, right? A molecule is 2 or more atoms linked together to make a substance with unique properties. And we put all those together in a certain order. We have our DNA, and then we form our double helix. And the code of the DNA is, it's the structure holding everything together. It's in the double helix right there. So here's our double helix. So it looks a little bit like a twisted ladder, right? Now, I will tell you, this was a breakthrough discovery by Watson and Crick back in the 1950s, but there are people who are still studying it today, and we think they may have been wrong. So we still think there's a double helix, but there might be a quadruple helix. In other words, there might be another side of the ladder on each side. So it might be doubled around that. We don't know. There's something interesting in some of the more advanced echo type pictures we're looking at today, but nobody's made anything absolutely sure about that. All right, so here we go. So you see how A and T now, so we have our bases. They are basic in the sense they're not acidic. They're alkaline. So that's one of the reasons they're called bases. And notice what these are the rungs. The sides of the ladder right here are made up of sugar and phosphorus. Okay, so sugar and phosphorus on this side, and base is going down like this, A and T and C and G. All right, very unique. Let's see what I got here. Here we go. Our structure of DNA. The backbone is sugar and phosphate. The steps are nucleotide bases. The information stored as a series of nucleotide bases, and we only need one side. I believe your book says this. We only need one side of the DNA to figure out the other side. It's like a little puzzle that we're going to answer. Do y'all have a bunch of letters written out for you? Something that looks kind of like this? Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna go and make this a little bigger. You only need one side of DNA to figure out the other side. All right. So this is what you should have in your book. Does that look right? Yes, it's a different language, right? Only one vowel. All right. So we're gonna say what matches up with the T? A. What matches up with the C? G, E, G, G, C, T, A, A, T. So you get it? Yeah, so you're supposed to write that in. Underneath your letters, go ahead and write those matching things in there, okay? Looks like I got that. I already got that. All right. So you need to remember that for the rest of your life, okay? When you're in Jeopardy someday, do me proud. They might ask for the actual words, so know those then. All right, we got all those in there. You'll probably have a question on your quiz that's going to have you match some of these up, and you should ace it, right? Just remember, at Christ is God. Okay. Reproduction. reproduction in life.
You didn't get me.
What?
Nothing.
You don't really need this. You don't need that on there. You
Okay.
should just look at your book and be able to do it.
Okay, then move on.
In fact, sometimes if you're looking at it like this, you might get lost, right, and put the wrong letter there. Always check. Yeah, indeed. God has created each organism with its own reproductive strategy to ensure the species will continue. All right, and there's a bunch of strategies out there for different life forms in order to reproduce. Two main ones, meiosis and mitosis, are what they're called. Those are just mean cell division. Cells are just making more cells. All right, so for instance, here we see something called binary fission. This is a bacterium, and the bacterium just splits into two. It's one bacteria, and then it just splits into two. It duplicates its DNA and makes two new organisms right there. So we call those daughter cells. And this is a very efficient way of reproducing, and this is how bacteria do it. Bacteria reproduce very efficiently. That's why bacteria can grow into millions in a very short amount of time. Another way of reproducing, some creatures hatch out of eggs.
I like that.
Look how cute. That's got to be fake though, right?
I like that.
Yeah. It's just, turtle eggs are not quite that stiff. They're kind of leathery, so I don't know. And then live birth, of course. We're looking at mammals here. Mammals have the process of live birth. And then, of course, we have some animals that are just strange. You know, the marsupials with a pouch and this kind of thing. You know, we have the duck-billed platypus, which is a mammal, but it lays eggs. You know, it's really bizarre. Okay. So I have a question for you. Why do turtles have large broods while monkeys only have one or two offspring? Why is that? There are thousands of turtles born in one clutch of a nest of turtles from one turtle mom.
Isn't it something like with the size of the animal?
Well, turtles get huge, depending. You know, some turtles. There's one turtle that's actually bigger than humans. That's the leatherback turtle. All right. What do you think, Noah?
I don't.
Okay, that's all right. So here, it has to actually do with their vulnerability as prey. All right, in other words, in fact, with my marine biology class, we have a lab that we do, and I have 100 ping pong balls. And those are labeled 1 through 100. And they represent turtle eggs. And I give everybody, they have a bowl, and they're holding their little bowl of their eggs with a number. And then I start to call out the numbers. And I start to say, oh, egg number 22 was just eaten by a bird. And other one dry. So we get all the way, I kid you not, at the end of those 100 eggs, you know how many survived? 2. And that's really very optimistic. It's really only 2 or 3 survive out of 1,000. I mean, it's really amazing how many of these guys, and when I say survive all the way to like 10 years old or whatever, you know, adulthood. Not all of them die when some of them die when they're in the nest. Some of them, the eggs don't hatch, right? Some of them die on their way to the beach. Some of them die when they're juveniles, when they're a year old or something like that. But that's why in some creatures that have large broods like this, it's because they need more, because so many are going to be eaten, whereas monkeys don't have as many natural predators. Humans, of course, have none. The only predator of a human would be another human. All right, so some of the offspring are born in a way that's called precocial. Have you ever heard the word precocious? Nobody's ever called you precocious, Luke? Okay. How about you, Noah? Has anybody ever called you precocious? That means you flip chairs over and stuff for no apparent reason.
No.
Yeah, set it down. Set it down. There we go. Thank you. All right, so what precocial offspring means is when the thing is born, it's really on its own and ready to survive on its own. So here's a chick. It hatches out of an egg, and then it's walking around and eating its own food. Mama's not feeding it, right? It doesn't need a mama to take care of it all the time. It's just going to go off on its own. So that's a precocial offspring. The chick is the best example of that. Then we have, but not all birds are that way. We know this, right? We have some called altricial. Look at those birds. Oh my goodness, they're helpless, right? They are helpless. And so they have to spend their time, you know, they hit just one little bump on the nest, and what do? Huh? feed me, right? So they have to have a mama bird come back and feed them until they have time to grow their feathers, to finish growing their eyes, and all this kind of stuff. So those are called altricial offspring. All right, and then so I would put humans in this group. We need lots of care from our mom, right? Babies born, they can't survive on their own, right? They need to be fed, they need to be taken care of, this kind of thing. But we also have some, think about a horse, right? We call those semi-precocial offspring. These are offspring that are walking, like a horse will start walking a few hours after it's born, but it still needs to nurse off its mother. So apparently so are giraffes. Giraffes are that same way.
Like something about like large mammals is whenever they're first born, there's a special milk that they need to get to build up their antibodies, or else they will die from other diseases.
Yeah, you know, it actually happens in humans too. It's called colostrum.
Yeah.
And colostrum passes on from the mother to the offspring antibodies, you know, in the milk. And it's before the milk is really milky. It's just called this colostrum, and it's very, very it's critical. I'd say it's critical for humans too, although we have many interventions now, right? So, all right, energy in life. We're going to move on to our next criteria of life here. Energy in life.
Cool.
We're going to see how plants, of course, are going to get their energy from the sun. And we call that metabolism, energy for life. All organisms must take energy from their surroundings and convert it for useful energy to live. All right? Strategies to do this. Number one, they can eat. Do you have that in your book? They can eat. Taking energy from their surroundings. That's us. We eat. Or they can make their own food. That's known as photosynthesis, a process by which green plants and some other organisms, namely bacteria and algae, will use energy from the sunlight and simple chemicals to produce their own food. There's another one called chemosynthesis. It's more rare, about bacteria that will use chemicals to do the same thing that photosynthesis does, but they're usually in the bottom of the ocean, at these ocean vents and things like this. All right, so do we know the photosynthesis equation yet? Have we studied that? Oh, okay, good. Olivia knows it, right, Olivia?
Not off the top of my head.
Oh, come on. All right, this is a chemical reaction that's taking place. This is the most famous chemical reaction, or not the most famous chemical reaction, but the most famous sentence here, chemical equation in biology. Okay, so we have 6 CO2. That's carbon dioxide. That's what we breathe out, right? Right, the plants are using it. And they need water, so we have 6 H2O. And they're going to make something. They're going to make C6 H12 O6, which is sugar. A special sugar called glucose. All right, glucose under there. And 6O2, which is oxygen that we breathe in. Okay, we have sun energy right here. That's making that, that's where the energy, so what I need the energy for from the sun, the energy is going to take these bonds, so I have CO2, it's actually double bonds there, and it takes energy to break those bonds, so I can turn these bonds into C6H12O6. My H2O, I need energy to break those bonds to reform them into something else. Okay, so the plants need us to breathe out on them so they can get that CO2, and we need the plants so they can release that O2 that we're breathing in. You see that beautiful symbiotic relationship going on right there. Probably the most beautiful of all the symbiotic relationships in all of the world. I will tell you that this reaction, right, the reason the 6 is in front of this is because whenever you're doing a chemical reaction, we always have to have it balanced, so the same thing on one side as it is on the other side. So right here I have 6 carbons, so I have to have 6 carbons here. And then 6 times 2 right here is some oxygens, and 6 more oxygens right here gives me 6, and then 6 times 2 right there. So that always has to be balanced. Someday when you take chemistry, you'll spend time, I'll give you, you'll get equations that you have to balance. And you have to make sure everything's the same on both sides. I have students who write this equation out to this day in high school to get 2 extra points on their quiz. All right, so that's how important this equation is. So put a little star by that. It's already written for you in your book, yes? And start memorizing that now. You're going to need it for the rest of your life. Jeopardy question right there. All right. Okay. Photosynthesis is the process by which most plants and some other organisms use the energy from the sun and simple chemicals to produce their own food. Now, did I already give you this sentence? Am I repeating this? It's just restated. I said the same information before. And I say here most plants, yeah, okay, it's all plants, but it's all plants. There's one plant I know of that is considered a plant that does not perform photosynthesis, called the Indian pipe brush. It's white. But all plants are green. All plants are green. And there's a reason for that, because the green stuff is what's using the energy from the sun. All right, so you had 3 blanks there to fill in? And we're good? All right. So here we go. We have our plant, we have our sun energy coming in, we have our CO2 and our H2O going in, and we have our oxygen coming out and our sugars. Now, who is the plant making the food for? You know who the plant's making the food for? It's making it for itself. Because when there's no sunshine, there's no photosynthesis. So at nighttime, what does the plant need? It needs to use the food that it stored. It stored the glucose. If I take this reaction right here and I go the other way, draw my arrow this way, okay, that's what we're doing. We're eating sugar and we're breathing. And what are we doing? We're breathing out CO2. We're also breathing out H2O. You can feel it right there in your hand. It's wet. Because we're breathing it out. It's part of the chemical reaction. It happens every time. When you breathe on a window and you leave a little mist on there, it's coming from your chemical reaction going on here. Plants do this at night. So plants they just store a whole lot of extra glucose in them for them to use, and then we, of course, use it. So this plant right here is storing its glucose in its fruit. All right, so tomatoes. It's also got seeds in there, so it can reproduce, right? Its job is to reproduce. Some plants store their glucose in their roots. If you've ever had carrots, you know that. And I could probably convince you carrots are sweet. Yeah? They're sweet. And that's because glucose is stored in there. Some plants store glucose in their stems. Asparagus, for instance, stores it in the stems. Some store it in underground roots that are called tubers. Those are potatoes and sweet potatoes and things like that. Sweet potatoes in particular have a lot of stored glucose. They're very sweet. Okay, so how plants make food? They do it with photosynthesis, taking carbon dioxide and water, making glucose and oxygen. I'm just restating that so that you understand how important it is. Okay? All right, so we are going to now have lab time, and we're going to do a couple of things. First thing we're going to do is we're going to make a model of DNA. Now, Olivia, you should remember how to do this. All right, we have plates. And this is going to help you remember forever what DNA looks like. And Mary, I'm sure you will. No?
I remember this.
We're going to make it with candy. I will tell you that we have marshmallows that are 4 different colors. And we're going to need to decide which one stands for which. I have to go ahead and say green stands for G. All right, makes sense. Our backbone's going to be sugar, of course. These are Twizzlers. Now, this, of course, is edible, but you need to know that Twizzlers, sadly, do contain gluten.
I don't really like Twizzlers.
Yeah, some people don't. You don't have to eat anything.
Okay.
All right, but we're going to bring you 8 toothpicks. Then we're going to bring you 2 sides of the ladder, and then enough marshmallows for you to make your thing. So let's make a decision. So if G is green, if green is G, what do y'all want C to be? After this, we're also going to do some low chemistry to look for food in plants. Okay.